And you know what? There are questions about the impact President Trump's travel ban could have on athletes and fans trying to get into this country.
The president's executive order bans travelers from 12 countries. It has exemptions for athletes participating and their support staff and immediate family. But it doesn't say anything about international fans.
In June 2025, President Donald Trump issued a travel ban covering 19 countries, 12 under a full ban and 7 with partial restrictions. Athletes and coaches are exempt, but fans are not. With the 2026 World Cup just a year away, co-hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico, the stakes are high. FIFA expects 6.5 million visitors and over $11 billion in revenue, much of it from U.S. venues. The question now is whether Trump's policy will cost America those gains while Canada and Mexico stand to benefit.
Iran has already qualified, and teams from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Libya also have a chance. Those are all countries with travel restrictions.
The economic risk starts with the most obvious point. Fans from fully banned countries such as Iran, Cuba, Haiti, Libya, and Sudan will not be allowed into the United States. Iran has already qualified, which means its team will compete without its supporters. Beyond those 12 nations, the system is under strain for everyone. Visa delays now stretch for months in many consulates, and even the State Department has warned travelers to apply as early as possible. These hurdles make it clear that the U.S. faces real obstacles in welcoming the international audience the World Cup was meant to attract. This has real financial consequences. Matches in Canada and Mexico are concentrated in the group stage, while the decisive rounds are all on American soil. If international visitors cannot secure visas, stadiums in cities like Los Angeles, Dallas, and New York may be filled primarily with domestic spectators. Tourism revenue, hotel occupancy, and local business income will all take a hit. FIFA's projection of $11 billion in revenue depends heavily on U.S. attendance and spending. If the United States loses even a fraction of those projected international visitors, it could mean billions of dollars left on the table. What was designed as an America First measure could become a case of America loses first.
Canadians, Canada, Canadian businesses, everybody will see the benefit from that. Likely, we're going to see about $2 billion increase to our GDP, as well as about $3.8 billion, upwards of $4 billion in positive economic output. We're talking about almost 25,000 jobs to be attributed to the FIFA World Cup in 2026.
While Washington tightens its borders, Canada is preparing to welcome the world. Toronto and Vancouver will host 13 matches, supported by a combined federal and provincial investment of over 220 million Canadian dollars. Toronto alone has budgeted $380 million for stadium upgrades, transit improvements, and training facilities. Deloitte and FIFA estimate that Canada's share of the tournament could generate nearly 4 billion Canadian dollars in positive economic output and create around 25,000 jobs. If fans choose to avoid the difficulties of entering the United States, these numbers could climb even higher. Prime Minister Mark Carney has emphasized a strategy of openness and stability. Canada does not need to confront Trump directly. By maintaining a welcoming image and ensuring smooth logistics, Ottawa positions itself as the safer and easier option for international fans. In this way, Trump's restrictions may indirectly boost Canada's return on investment. Mexico, with its own host cities, could also gain from the diversion of tourists. What was meant to isolate has instead created opportunity across the border.
Since Trump took office, the U.S. has seen a dramatic downturn in inbound international tourism, with a projected 8.7% drop in U.S. international arrivals for 2025.
What if fans don't want to travel to the U.S. to watch the games?
The contrast is striking. Trump has chosen to enforce a hard line on immigration, even at the risk of undermining America's role as the center of the World Cup. Carney has chosen to project calm, patience, and openness, turning Canada into a beneficiary of the very policies that threaten the U.S. economy. Instead of one country reaping the benefits, Canada and Mexico may secure a larger share of the spotlight and the financial rewards. The 2026 World Cup will highlight not only soccer, but political choices. The U.S. has the stadiums and key matches, yet its travel ban risks turning that advantage into loss. Canada is ready to welcome the fans who cannot enter the U.S. This tournament may be remembered as much for the economic lesson as for the games when one country closes its doors, others gain.
In a social media post, Trump said, quote, "The August 1st deadline is the August 1st deadline. It stands strong and will not be extended."
President Trump announced a tariff extension for Mexico this morning, posting to social media, "We have agreed to extend for a 90-day period."
On July 31st, the White House stood firm. No country would get an extension. August 1st was the final cutoff. That's what the world was told. No delays, no exceptions. The US would begin slapping 35% tariffs on goods from any nation that hadn't signed a new trade deal. But hours before the deadline, Trump changed his mind. Mexico got a 90-day extension. Canada didn't. This wasn't a small footnote. It revealed something deeper about how Trump's trade strategy is playing out and who it's really targeting.
Mexico is a very unique situation of all the other countries around the world because, of course, we share our southern border with Mexico.
The administration had spent weeks repeating that there would be no further delays. The tariffs were set in motion months ago and had already been pushed back once, from April to August. Officials said publicly that countries had time and the deadline would be enforced. But just before midnight, Trump suddenly spared Mexico. The reason? According to his spokesperson, Mexico is a unique case because of its shared southern border and recent cooperation on stopping drug and human trafficking. That framing sounds logical at first, but when Canada is brought into the picture, the logic starts to unravel. Canada also shares a long land border with the United States, over 5,500 miles, the longest undefended border in the world. The two countries are deeply tied through CUSMA, which still governs the majority of their trade. So why didn't Canada get the same 90-day grace period? Trump's team didn't offer a clear answer. What's clear, though, is that Canada wasn't even in the running for an exemption. Instead, the White House seemed focused on escalation. Just hours before tariffs took effect, Trump cited issues far outside trade, like Canada's recent recognition of Palestine, as a reason for breakdowns in negotiations. It had nothing to do with customs or commerce, and everything to do with politics. This wasn't about trade strategy, it was pressure politics, plain and simple. The same playbook Trump used on Brazil. Trump's decision to exempt Mexico wasn't rooted in a broader policy shift. It was a political calculation. While the administration framed it as a border issue, that logic crumbles under scrutiny. The US has critical economic and security ties with Canada too, especially in energy. Canada supplies over 4 million barrels of oil per day to the US, according to the US Energy Information Administration, making it America's top foreign energy source by far. Yet no exemption was offered. The real difference? Mexico agreed not to retaliate. Canada didn't. Prime Minister Mark Carney continued negotiations but refused to rush into a lopsided deal. And in Trump's world, standing firm doesn't earn you more time, it earns you a target.
Well, they have to pay a fair rate. That's all. It's very simple. They have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers. Farmers very badly. They've been treating our country very badly for years. And look, we like Canada. I love Canada. I have so many friends in Canada. But they've been very poorly led.
Despite the pressure, Canada didn't blink. Trump's move may have been designed to trigger panic in Ottawa, but it didn't. Officials stayed the course. No public outburst, no rushed announcement, no last-minute signature. While Mexico's deal is still undefined and its exemptions temporary, Canada is choosing clarity over chaos. Economists from multiple Canadian outlets have pointed out that over 80% of Canadian exports still flow tariff-free under CUSMA. That buys time, and more importantly, it gives leverage.
This guy will say something one day, and he'll wake up, and the cheese slips off the cracker, and then all of a sudden he goes the other way. And you're thinking, how do you deal with a guy like this?
What we saw on August 1st wasn't a rulebook being followed. It was one man's playbook, where deadlines bend, allies are tested, and pressure is personal. Trump gave Mexico more time because it fit his optics. He denied Canada that same time because Ottawa didn't fold. But trade isn't just about theater. And Canada's refusal to rush shows that it understands that. In the end, that calm might prove to be its strongest move yet.
I'm praying that everything's going to go fine. But if it doesn't, I got to ask the people, do you trust President Trump? I don't.
When the 35% tariff hit Canadian goods outside the USMCA, it wasn't tied to a breakdown in trade talks. There was no last-minute provocation, no missed agreement. The deadline set by President Trump simply passed, and the penalty was enforced. From softwood lumber to steel, the pain hit fast and deep. But the bigger problem wasn't just the tariffs themselves. It was the instability they represented. In recent weeks, the US president raised tariffs on dozens of countries, though in several notable cases, the tariffs were imposed for reasons that went far beyond trade. India was targeted for buying Russian oil, while Canada was placed in the same political category as China, a country that refused to bend the knee to the US and dared to hit back. And that's what turned this into more than a trade dispute. It became a question of how Canada should respond to a neighbor whose rules change without notice and whose goals shift by the day.
Carney has two big meetings today, cabinet and with the premiers. What is he saying to both groups?
I think he's giving them an update and telling them the state of play. I mean, the prime minister has been very good at keeping, his own government informed on stuff. He needs to have that political support around him. As he'll hear the views and take the temperature on that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't wait. Within days, he convened a virtual summit with provincial premiers and cabinet members. The goal wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. The meeting came after Trump's deadline had passed. Carney updated leaders on the stalled U.S. talks while gauging support across a divided political landscape. Ontario Premier Doug Ford called for a tariff-for-tariff response. Others, like Alberta's Danielle Smith, showed more caution. But Carney chose not to engage directly with Trump at this stage. That silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. The message was clear. Canada would not be baited into an emotional reaction. Not yet. Earlier in the year, Canada responded forcefully. It imposed retaliatory tariffs and unveiled billion-dollar support packages, like the $1.2 billion Canadian dollar plan for the softwood lumber sector announced in early August. Steel producers received similar backing in July. But now, the tone is shifting. Carney's top ministers, including Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, are signaling a move toward flexibility. Speaking from Mexico City, where they met with President Claudia Sheinbaum, Champagne emphasized that Canada would reassess its trade response if it served the national interest. That doesn't mean Canada is backing down. It means Canada is choosing its moments. After all, 85% of Canadian exports to the US remain tariff-free under USMCA. The government is playing a long game, protecting vital sectors while keeping the door open for meaningful talks.
I think we're going to see some real progress today, though, Faiza, on that list of those nation-building projects. He really wants to get going on those quickly. He says the federal government is going to be up to speed to start approving those within 2 years, starting in September, when that office is.
Carney has refused to commit to any artificial deadlines. While Trump accelerates pressure with time-bound ultimatums, Carney is working through long-term plans, boosting domestic infrastructure, building a market for Canadian lumber within Canada, and expanding ties with Mexico. The Canadian government is launching a new federal office by early September to fast-track major nation-building projects, railways, power lines, and port expansions. These are not press releases. They are structural shifts meant to reduce reliance on U.S. access and create resilience, especially if future shocks occur. At the same time, coordination with Mexico is becoming more strategic. Both countries were blindsided by Trump's moves. Now they're finding shared cause: energy security, critical minerals, and joint resilience.
Looking at the Amcan Fortress, put a ring around America and the U.S., in Canada, have the two strongest nations in the world. We could thrive and prosper. He'd rather fight. I don't want to fight. I want to fight with our closest allies and friends.
Trump's trade strategy is unpredictable, volatile, and even. But that unpredictability may be Canada's greatest reason not to rush into a bad deal. Carney's approach isn't static, it's calibrated. Yes, some retaliatory tariffs may be rolled back, Yes, some sectors may be shielded more than others, but none of it signals surrender. It signals discipline. In a negotiation with no rules, Canada is choosing strategy over spectacle. The goal isn't to win headlines, it's to preserve long-term economic security. And in this kind of trade war, that might be the smartest move of all.